Microphone on. Amen. Amen. Well, I'm glad we have you have joined us this morning, whether you're in the sanctuary or online. We do appreciate your attendance. I'm hopeful that this Sunday school lesson will be of joy for you. Today, our lesson is entitled "The Service of a Godly Leader." Amen. Service of a godly leader. And we're going to be, the lesson is from Ezra, 6th chapter, verses 13 through 22. Ezra, the 6th chapter, verses 13 through 22. The service of a godly leader. We'll be talking about the restoration of the temple in Jerusalem. This is his first destruction. So the people had to repair their temple. Well, they couldn't repair their temple because they had been taken into captivity, as we hear, by the Persian king Cyrus. And so that's why their temple was laid in ruins. Amen. Okay, so it's a very good lesson. Not yet. I'm getting ready. It's a very good lesson. I would like to do it a little different. We've been usually doing, going back to the questions and then, not questions, but some statements and then moving forward. But I want to start at the beginning this time because I think it's necessary for us to understand the story and the incidents that follows. And it's laid out very well in this lesson plan. The service of a godly leader. The golden text is from Ezra 6, verses 14. I'm on page 20 in our book. I'm on page 20. I'm going to start at the beginning. The golden text reads as thus: "And the leader of the Jews built, and they prospered through the prophecies of Haggi, the prophet, and Zechariah, the son of Iddo. And they build and finish it according to the commandments of God of Israel." All right, so as we start and we look on page 20, we're talking about one of the things we have to take into consideration is that first paragraph, cooperation by the Persian officials. Why that is so important is that when the Israelites were trying to rebuild the temple, some of the Persians that was in charge at the time were stopping them from building. And so they had to get some permission from the ruling king at that time to build their temple. So as you can see, it says in that first paragraph, the foundation of the temple had been laid during the reign of Cyrus, 536 BC. That was the one king. And now Cyrus is an interesting person in that he was a non-Christian that was picked by God to do something for the people of Israel. Okay? And so now we see Cyrus said nothing had been done until the second year of the reign of Darius. Okay, so Darius is after Cyrus, okay, as king. And so we look at these two, but then too, here come God's people, Haggi and Jeremiah, bringing the words of the Lord and talking about the temple. Now, when the people were trying to build the temple, as I said, they was building it in the reign of Darius, who was the king after Cyrus. All right. Now, so they didn't have permission through Darius' office to build a temple. And so that's why they was having so much problems. And plus, there was a lot of confusion as to if they want to build a temple and one thing and another. And so that was one of the problems. So I'm going to read for you from the Bible, the book of Ezra, chapter 1, verse 2. Thus says the king Cyrus of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given to me all the kingdom of earth, and he has charged me to build him a house. Now, this is a Persian king. This is not an Israelite. This is someone who's from another country. Build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judea. Whoever is among you of all the people, may his God be with him. And let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. So here the king Cyrus is speaking to those in captivity. Look, if you want to leave, you can leave and go rebuild this temple, okay? So he continues, and he is the God who is in Jerusalem. And let each survivor, in whatever place he sojourned, be assisted by the men of his place with silver, gold, and goods, and with beasts, besides free will offering for the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. So here, the king is making a decree saying, look, all of the Israelites, if you want to go back to Jerusalem and build your temple, you're welcome to do that. And all the people have to, I won't say have to, but are encouraged to help you and assist you along the way. All right. Now that's very, I don't know. That's past the reason and understanding for a lot of us, because here is someone that's outside the realm of Christianity, outside the realm of God's purview, but yet now God has given him direction as to how to deal with his people. Okay, so we go back to our lesson. That was so he's Persian. He made a rule, a law. Cyrus did. So Cyrus, unfortunately, didn't keep his kingship long, and then after him come Darius. Okay, but he made this decree. He put it into the records. All right, because this so now we have the building of the temple. Now I want you to go to page 21. You see at the top of the first column there, that first paragraph, where it says the temple was finished 20 years after construction had started, and almost 70 years after the first temple had been destroyed. Okay. But it would eventually outlast Solomon's temple. The first temple lasted just under 400 years, including the improvements later made by, see that name there? Yeah, that's who? That's the king that was in power when Christ was crucified. Okay, and so 400 years, the second, including the improvements were made by Herod, stood for 585 years. So there's a lot of calculation as to just how long is that. So I calculated to the temple stood until at least 45 A.D., okay, after Christ's death. So from the year that it was built, way back, you see here on page 20, 520 B.C., that was before Christ, and it lasted at least 45 to 50 years after Christ passed. And we know that it was destroyed in the years 70 by, what's that king? Nero. Okay. All right. So we know the temple lasts that long. It lasted 485 years, and that was longer than the temple that was constructed by Solomon. Okay. Now, this is important because now you have to understand, I'm on page 21, you have to understand all these people are in exile. They're not in their home. The Persians have taken them to their country, and they living under their rules as slaves or indentured people, whichever there is. And so they're called the children of Israel. You see that on page 21, right under joyous celebration. They're called the children of the captivity or children of Israel. The reason they call that because when the Persians come in and capture everybody, they just took everybody. They didn't take them according to their tribes, et cetera, et cetera. They just swooped them all up and took them with them. And so they call the children of Israel, all right? So, and that's will come into play later on. It's a name given to all the 12 tribes, okay? Now, and we continue on page 21 in the first paragraph, first column, I'm sorry. If you go down to it, it says the group, that's the second paragraph, the group that constituted the children of Israel were the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the returned exile. So it wasn't the ones that we think that went through all of the deserts and all of that Christian foundation. These were people that were just picked up along the way, and they just called them the children of Israel, you know. So that's who that was. And so these are the ones that are contributed to. So it's not really any special indication as to being of a 12 tribe. You just in the room, you know. We gathered everybody, and all of y'all together make the children of Israel. We don't know if you're from Benjamin tribe or Manasseh's tribe or whatever. All right, so let's move on. I'm still on 21. Now, the thing you must understand that the Israelites had been in captivity for over 100 years. So they haven't done any worship in their temple, all right? And so that's one thing we have to consider, because that was one thing that was very central to the Israelites was their worshiping experience, okay? So here on page 21, go to that second paragraph, the second column, the second paragraph. I want you to go down about the third sentence. It said, and we're talking about the people and their ability to worship. You see where it says, the destruction of the first temple and the cessation of worship for 70 years. See, they hadn't been able to worship for 70 years. So to put this temple back together, it expressed to God the Jews' intent to put that behind them and recommit themselves to godly worship. See, so they haven't worshiped. They haven't been able to pay their respects to God or do anything in their temple. They'll have to go along with worshiping whatever pagan god was prominent wherever they were, okay, at the time. All right, so now they want to get back to worship, so that's why they're rebuilding the temple, so they can recommit themselves to godly worship. Okay. Now, as you stay in that second column, move on down to the last paragraph on that page. Now, this is very important because it says that, but the emphasis in our text is not on the adherence to David's instruction, because David received instructed to build the first temple in a certain way. David did, all right? It says, but to those written in the book of Moses. See, David got his instruction from some of his desires, but Moses got his instruction from God. It was Moses who gave the original prescription for the priestly and Levitical duties. And so Moses received the instruction from God how the temple should be laid out, how the furnishings and ornaments within the temple should be done, and how it should be taken care of. All right, because it's one of those things, you know, we as young men sometimes, and as men, always want to go help somebody, you know, and be of service. But you remember in the Bible, when they were transporting the Ark of the Tabernacle and the cart that they were using, slid a little bit, and the ark was coming off of it. So two young men went to steady the ark, but instead they were pronounced dead because God said only the Levites are to touch this ark. Okay. All right, so those are some of the rules that was given by Moses. So it wasn't what David said that was important. It's what Moses was saying as given to him by God. Okay? No, I'm just saying sometimes if you go into a situation, you may not experience the results that you want to experience. All right. Yeah, you say, did they know the rules? Yeah, everyone knew. Everyone knew. It was still a violation. Exactly, exactly. So, and now that's not only the first time that happened. That happened, if I'm not mistaken, with Aaron. That was Moses' brother. He was a Levite, and all of the people in his family, his sons and everybody, were in the family of the Levites. And so his sons, we were talking about at the table yesterday, were abusing their authority and position by doing what they thought was best. Because if someone is bringing an offering and they've already drained the blood out of it, and they bring it, and it's an offering, a meat offering, and maybe they only bring to the priest one leg. So there's 3 other legs in the rest of the body, right? But if it's presented to the priest, then it's for the temple. So they were taking that and eating that, but it was temple food. See? So that's just like with David. There was a story where David was on the run from Saul. He was running heavy and fast, and he couldn't get out of Saul's way. And he had these 200 chosen men with him, and they were hungry. And so they was going through this countryside one time, and they seen this temple. So they said, okay, let us go in there and get something to eat. Now, in the Jewish temple, there's always bread on the altar, and you're not supposed to touch that, you know. And so they came in, okay, this bread, we hungry. And so they ate the bread, you know. And so he knew, you know, it was wrong. And sure, later, consequently, you know, he had to pay for it. But yes, they knew some things, and things was written, and you knew that if you violated those, that you would suffer consequences. Just like in life, we were talking about that yesterday. Remember, we you know, it may not be apparent to us what the consequences are, but there are some consequences, you know, and so that's the thing. So, and here, by these Israelites being in capture, you know, and someone else's rule and domination, then they somewhat in their brain have to follow them along with what they do. All right, and so, and that being the case, what's the saying, Cynthia? When you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. You know, because you know I've traveled a little bit, and you go to some places just because you're from the United States, you just can't do what you want to do over here. You know, and so that's the thing, and so that's what some of the problems that they encountered when they was trying to rebuild the temple, because we have a lot of people that's already said in this way, we can worship in this little niche, just get one of these little figurines, put some orange peelings on it with a incense stick, and we can worship that. That's not where we come from. You know, we come from the temple worship. We come from worshiping God. Okay. And so that's the thing. So the thing about it is they had been in captivity for 70 years, and they haven't did the yearly worship, because the Jews are required to do some worshiping every year. Passover, Day of Atonement, those particular things. So leading up to Easter, there's prior to that, there's a lot of worship that we need to do. There's the Day of Trumpets, there's the Day of Tents, there's the Day of Meeting that leads up to Easter, which is the celebration of the Passover. All right? And so all these leads up to that, okay? And so they haven't been able to participate in that, and we know that the Jews are highly religious and very ceremonial, so they have to have their religion and their celebrations. Okay, so one of the things I really wanted to bring to your attention, I have to take you back for a minute. Let's go back to page 20 under the cooperation by the Persians official. And in that second paragraph, the building was then resumed, talking about the temple, but the regional Persians official soon intervened, asking by what authority the Jews were doing this and writing to Darius. So, you just can't come in our country, our territory, and start building something. And they had run over it, tore it apart, burned it up. See? And so they want to know where you guys get this authority from. See? And so, quite naturally, they had to tell them, well, we got the authority from King Cyrus. Well, that's good. But he's not the king anymore. Darius is the king. So Darius ruled, right? And so it says, and so they asked him what authority the Jews was doing this, and writing to Darius, requested that he investigate the matter. Darius did so and found that the decree of Cyrus with this specific instruction for rebuilding the temple. So Cyrus, who God had told, look, this is what I want you to do for my people, And so Cyrus made a decree saying when the Israelites go back to Jerusalem, they have my authority to build the temple, okay? And so these Persian officials didn't understand that. Now, what I wanted you to pay particular attention to was the words Persian. Now, we're not talking about Roman officials. We're not talking about Greek officials. These are Persians. They're from the east. They're probably in the community of the three wise men, So they're from another world altogether. That's like if someone come here and try to instruct us, say someone from Honduras would come here and try to instruct us on how to do whatever we're doing. See, so we wouldn't go for it. And so these people are not going for it either. And so they're working under one king, but the king before him, he superseded this king. Cyrus superseded Darius because he left a decree. And you have to honor the one in front of you, And so that's very important. And these are Persians officials, not Greek, not Roman officials. They won't let them build it. We have invaded this country, taken over the country. We're in charge. See, how you going to come from someplace and tell us about something that was before our time? Okay. All right. So, but then as Darius looked into it, he found a decree by Cyrus which specifies these people have the authority by the king of Persia to rebuild this temple. Okay. So that and so as we have to understand that the Israelites had problems because they couldn't hold anything, because they didn't have the military might, they didn't have the understanding. They was farmers and shepherds, sheep herders, as we call them. And so they didn't have the might. They didn't even know what iron was until they crossed over into Jericho, So they're fighting their battles with sticks, and daggers. But when they go past Jericho, now these armies that went there before them are advanced, and they have all this, the Iron Age. They have all of this weaponry. They are made out of metals, and so they just taking everything from the poor little Israelites. So see, if it wasn't for God's help, they still would have been on this side of the Jericho. of the Jordan. Okay, so I think those are important. So let's go to our practical points, Fontre. Let's go to our practical points 23. And we had said we was going to do 1 and 3. Okay? Everybody in agreement? Wanda? Gladys? Tina? All right. And Fontre. All right. So number 1, our great God uses both believers and unbelievers to do his will. Right? So let's go to our text with verses 13 through 15. It says, the first verse says, then Tatnea, the governor on this side of the river, okay, Shathar, almost Banzai, Bozane, and they're, now the reason they say it's this side and that side is because, as I mentioned, the river Jordan is the dividing point, is the point of demarcation. So when they say on this side, that means the side where they have crossed over the river. It's not prior to them crossing the Jordan River, all right? And so these people were ones that was going to help the Israelites rebuild the temple, okay? And so these are believers and unbelievers. Number 1, 3 to 15. I didn't do number 15. Okay, 15, and this house was finished on the 3rd day. Okay. All right, let's go to number 3. Sacrifices and offerings are always a part of true worship. Do we make sacrifices? Beg your pardon? You have to give up. Yeah. Yeah. And they're always part of true worship, because we have to worship with spirit and truth. You were going to say, Wanda? Yeah. Yeah. But I like the part of joining closer to him, and that's very important. And I think that's why they set up sacrifices, and God set up sacrifices, let you know you drifted off, that you should come back to me. And unfortunately, that's not one of the talking points in today's society as far as sacrifices, because we don't see it as a part of giving up something, where the Israelites, they had to give up something in order to come to the temple,
Because now society is more, have a more
Yeah.
You're in that way. You're not going to sacrificial acts on your mindset.
And that's true. And that's true.
You are willing to sacrifice when you always expecting to receive a blessing right after it, which is not always, like say you sacrifice, it's not going to, because the time is inevitable, like you say, who's to say you're going to get blessed today just because I done gave up my last $5 to somebody who really needed it.
But
Yeah.
you shouldn't to sacrifice expecting a blessing.
Exactly.
You sacrifice
Some
so that you can get close to
they'll
him.
sacrifice expecting
Then
the
they're
blessing.
not really sacrificing.
Yeah. And
That's not a sacrifice. If
and
I'm giving up something because I know I'm getting something back, that's not a sacrifice.
yeah.
But
And
you're still attached to it anyway. Because it was mine, but I'm let you hold it because it's going to be multiplied.
yeah.
You have to, when you sacrifice, you give it up, you take it to the altar, and you leave it there. But when your mind is expecting a blessing because I gave up something that I really didn't want to, because I'm gonna get something greater than that. So you're still attached to it. You have to surrender. Surrender is the best word. Surrender and give up something and leave it there. Because I'm leaving it there. Now I'm getting closer to you, Lord. So I need this time to not focus on what I had, but to focus on you.
And that's the thing. You have to understand between sacrifice and offering. And to understand that when I'm sacrificing something, I'm just taking it to the temple, to the house of God, and just, yeah. And that's, as Cynthia was saying, that is done in order to bring me back to God. Because I may not have committed one of those 7 deadly sins, but I have committed personal sins or sins which is towards God. So sacrificing is story. Old folks always have stories. Story. There was this Indian that came to the church, and every time they had first Sundays, he would always put a little bit on the altar, So this one Sunday just happened to be Easter Sunday, and the pastor was speaking about how God gave his all and all. And so the Indians rushed out of the service, and everybody said, "Ooh, what's happened? What's wrong?" And so before the end of service, the Indian bust through the church doors. He had his teepee, his animals, and everybody. He said, if God can give his all for me, I can give my all for him. You see? And so those are some things we have to distinguish between sacrifices and offering. We're not so much in the sacrifice because we don't have it in our head, because that's something that has been taken away from as being a duty or being a responsibility of a Christian. We don't have to sacrifice now. We can receive. That's what the second covenant is about. You can just receive personally within your own self, where in the sacrifices we have to do it through that priest who was the entry to the holies of holy, the room where the Lord was. Where God was. Okay? So with Jesus Christ's crucifixion and ascension into heaven, well then he's our sacrifice. All right? And so that's why we don't have the attention on sacrifice like it used to be, Yeah. So, but that's one thing. And like I said, they were in captivity for 70 years, so they wanted to restore their worship. As it says on page 21, they wanted the restoration of worship by the children of Israel was on behalf of all the tribes. All 12 tribes wanted to return to worship. Now, that was very difficult in the matter of some tribes have already gone off to claim their land and to claim their territory. So all tribes, all tribes were not present during the dedication of the temple. Okay? So, and so that was one thing, but the temple was dedicated as to the children of Israel, as to all of the Israelites. All right? So, and that's the thing, and it's there's not an analogy I can think of as today because we haven't lost anything of that magnitude. You know, we may have lost, you know, pancake mix, you know, some things that are external, you know, but we haven't lost anything that really is that magnanimous, you know. If we were to lose, say, our ability to worship, you know, then that would somewhat be. But this here is the place, the centralization of everything that they are, of their spirituality, you know. So that was one thing, but I thought it was awesome, and we got one more. We went through the practical points. We didn't go through the research and discussion. We only had one in research and discussion, didn't we? Number 4, if joy is a proper response to God's blessing, why do you think it is often missing from his people's worship? Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's a mental thing.
There you go. Yeah.
It's a mental thing.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I feel like being joyful also has a part of being, I don't know, quite humble. Like if you know yourself, if you're humble, then like to certain things, like your pride will probably be carried out differently.
Mm-hmm.
You know, certain people like me, or you know, whoever, you know, going to a family gathering, seeing a bunch of food, I'll probably be the last one to eat because that's just how I am. I want to see everybody eat before me. You know, that's joy in my heart though. That's just making me happy. You know, some people can take pride in different things, so but that wouldn't answer it. So I don't know.
But it answers as long as it's dealing with joy and a proper response to God's blessing. Why do you think is often missing? Well, first of all, and the title of the lesson somewhat speaks to that. You know, it's the service of the godly leaders. If the leaders are not able to lead you to the point of transformation, to the point and place of peace and happiness, then it's going to be missing. You know, and then too, that is also on us nowadays, as we were just saying. You know, where it used to be on the temple and the priest to make sure that happened. Now it's on you as an individual to find a place where you can make that happen yourself. That's just like things have changed in our society where we used to be able to repair this, that, and the other. And that, for us, that gave us longevity. So if we had a washing machine that went out, then we could find some way to repair it, and we wouldn't have to purchase another one. But nowadays, we're in the age of replacement. If that unit goes out, you get rid of that unit. We don't have time to, you know, fix it, da-da-da-da. And so that's a different where back in the day, we know that in our coming up, where we had pastors who was very vocal, and they did that for you. They gave you the Spirit. They put it in you. Nowadays, if you put it in yourself, you know, it's microwave. It's on you. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I thank you for your time and this morning in our lesson. So next week we're going to continue in service, and that's one thing we're going to be talking about next week is faithful, faithful service. Okay. Now we're going to be talking about a lot of these prophets that we'll be speaking of are prophets you never heard. I won't say you never heard, but are not brought to your attention very often because they're called minor prophets. All right? So we're going to be speaking about them. So they have a lot of importance in the Bible, you know. Because always, if you have a major prophet, you got to have a minor prophet to hold up the major prophet because he has a lot of work to do. You take like Jeremiah, you know, he's got all these important people he has to talk to, and if you don't have the Haggars and the smaller prophets, you know, to talk to the rest of the people, you know. But that's what we're going to be doing next week. We're still going to be talking about service. And that's one thing we as a church have to understand, service. I'm supposed to be quitting 10 minutes ago, huh? Okay. Amen. All right, then. Any more questions or comment about our today lesson, Godly Leaders? I just want to make one observation right quick. Yesterday, if you've seen the men at the picnic, we were over there participating in some extracurricular activities. But what I was so enthused about is that the gentlemen that we had at the table, well, you know, they were all pastors and Mr. Barlow as well. And we had conversations, but that conversation all centered around the godliness or lack of that is present in some churches today. And so I was just, it was, to me, it was ironic that we had that conversation and the lesson come up today about godly leaders. Yeah, because there was a lot of godly leaders at that table. Yeah. All right, so we can take up the collection now.